Yeah, I finished watching season or final season or season four, the part one. Um, I kind of debated about putting that into like two different videos. One about like all the way up to when they the Marley arc, and then when they leave Marley, and then when they get back to Paradise. But I think I'm just gonna do it all as one. Hopefully, I can get it as concise as possible. I'll probably miss a few things, and I apologize if I miss something. That's a part of it that you really like. Um, but of course, this is for Attack on Titan final season or season four, part one. I know they are going to do the final season part two, but according to one of the websites that I saw, it's not supposed to be released, or it's not going to start airing until I think 2022, from what I saw. Which with everything that happened with COVID, and then in regards to I mean, it's a very high quality series, and the manga only just finished up a couple of months, or a month or so ago. Which is kind of what brought me to doing this in the first place, because I decided to, well, let's see what happens in the end of the manga, and then it's just like, okay, and then it's just like, well, so I understand a little bit more of it, or I can understand things a little better in context, I'll watch the series again. I have not decided if I'm going to read the manga. I know that the anime is pretty faithful to the manga. I think there's like maybe some tiny little bits of like filler in it. And I know that the manga, or that the anime, I think did some like OVAs where they show some things, like they show a little bit more with like Annie in the capital, just like her regular day to day life in the capital, like where she gets to know Hitch and Marlowe and some of the rest of the MPs. And then I think there was some other ones where they do, um, where there was a scout that had encountered a Titan, and the Titan had the ability to talk, and the Titan thought that she was Emir, not as in Emir Fritz, but that the Titan thought that the scout, I don't remember the scout's name, was Emir, as in the Emir that was in love with Historia, because of course Emir had been used as this like figurehead of this cult. And then her and the rest of the cult members were turned into Titans. And this Titan apparently was one of the cult members, and it thought that the scout was Emir. And she tried talking with it, and it told her some things, but then it couldn't tell her everything, and it still ended up attacking her, unfortunately. I might see if I can find that video somewhere. I'm aware of it just because like I've read about it, and it sounded rather interesting, and I've seen some other videos about it, but I might see if I can find that OVA. I think there's a few others, and I know there's like side manga that they've done, that Isayama has done, where I think there's one that's more about like Levi, and then I know that there's a side one that's about a guy that's called the Titan's Son, um, which is called like Before the Fall. I may end up reading that one at some point. I've seen some, or I've skimmed some of it at Barnes and Noble, and I'm like, well, this looks kind of interesting, so I might give that a try. I know it's still along the lines of extremely dark, but I might give it a try. We'll see. But moving on into season four. I'll go back and forth between season four and final season. Sorry. If that's confusing, I apologize. So we of course start off with, it's 4 years later after the end, well, it's kind of 3 years later after the end of the third season, but like about 4 years later, since Reiner and Zeke and such left, and Peak of course as the Cart Titan left Paradise. And we see that we are now introduced to these new warrior candidates, Gabby, Falco, Zofia, and I don't remember what the other kid's name is, I'm sorry. But we're introduced to them, and they're in this war zone at the moment, which is currently, Marley is in a war against this other country that seems to be kind of these other allied countries. One of them seems to be a little bit more of a Middle Eastern or an Arabic-based country, just from like the design of the characters. And if I'm wrong, and if that's not what it's based on, then I apologize. And so we see that war going on. We see, out of the four, the four recruits, Gabby seems to be the most determined, of course, to become the Armored Titan candidate. We, of course, learn that she is Reiner's cousin. So I can understand why they would probably have her in rather high regard in regards to getting, the Armored Titan. She's not the best when it comes to like her exact scores on like tests and stuff like that. She seems to be the best when it comes to physically performing, best when it comes to coming up with plans. We see her come up with a very good plan that I'll go over in a minute. And then, of course, she's also related to Reiner, so there's that whole concept of, if she ate Reiner, then she would gain his memories because it's, she would gain his memories faster because they're blood related. Because we learn about that, with the founding Titan, it gets passed down through the Fritz or through the Reese family. And, we learn about it that way, and of course there's the the Warhammer Titan, which I'll get to, that is passed down through the Tiber family, of course. But we have, of course, we're introduced to the four them, and then we're introduced to another one that seems to be the one that is meant to take over for Zeke, who, for the life of me, for some reason, I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. I know that we're introduced to Galliard, who is the brother of Marcel, who was the kind of the original holder of the Jaw Titan before Ymir ate him, when Reiner and Bertolt and Annie and Marcel arrived on Paradis. And then he subsequently, we learn that he has eaten Ymir, because we see him running around as the Jaw Titan during this war at one point, and we see the Cart Titan as well. I apologize for not... Porco is Falco's older brother. Sorry, that just popped in my head. But we're, of course, introduced to them, and Porco is kind of... And now I just had the image of Porco Rosso from, Porco Rosso, the Miyazaki movie, fighting a Titan. That is just a very odd image. Admittedly, he has his plane. So, okay, yeah, him versus Titan with plane. Maybe put money on Porco in that case. And Porco Rosso in that case. Okay, moving back to the topic at hand. We have Porco that's arguing with... this one of the commanders in the Marleyan army, and he's like, no, the defenses are too much. There's going to be this armored train coming down. We can't just send the troops. Of course they're using the Eldians as like the front line, of course, and they will sacrifice the Eldians before they sacrifice their own men, because of course the Eldians are expendable. Because I talked about this with my mom, or I was explaining some of this to my mom, and I explained to her kind of like how the internment zones were, and how, like, they have the armbands and all these other things that go along with this. And I'm like, and like I explained how they basically like brainwash the kids from the time that they're young. They teach them in school, the Eldians, the Eldian Empire, everything, all the Titans and everything, like everything that they have done, you have to be punished for everything that your ancestors did. All the horrible things that we say your ancestors have done over the centuries and everything, done to not only to the Marleyan people, but to all these other races and everything, everything that they have done, you need to be punished for, because you are their descendants. Therefore, blah, 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 blah. And it's drilled into their heads. And that, the concepts are like only good Eldians are either Eldians that are willing to fight for Marley and give up their own lives to be turned into Titans to use against Marley's enemies, for the homeland. Or if you're a Titan that's willing, if you're an Eldian that's willing to go through the warrior candidate program. And particularly if you're one of the ones that gets chosen. Which of course we see that Gabby seems to be the one that's going to be chosen to become the Armored Titan when Reiner's term is up. And then of course we have the moments where we also have Falco, who of course the four of these are of course competing to become the next Armored Titan. They're all competing to become the next Armored Titan, of course. And it's kind of assumed that Gabby is going to be the next one, but of course Falco wants to be the next one. Partially because he wants to protect Gabby, because he doesn't want her to have, the 13-year ticking clock that all of the Titans have, and, that all the Titan shifters have. Clearly, it doesn't apply to all Titans. It's just the Titan shifters, because we know that there were other Titans on Paradis that have been Titans for, like, Ymir was a Titan for like 60 years before she got turned back, and she didn't age, so you don't age as a Titan. And, the rest of, a bunch of the other Titans that were, like, turned with her, we see some of them. We see some of the other Titans that were turned with Grisha, returned, when Grisha was brought to the island and such. So Titans can kind of have an indefinite lifespan, I would assume, until you're actually killed. The shifters, on the other hand, only seem to have about 13 years. And, at this point in time, Reiner's had the Titan for about, I'd say about 9 years or so, and Zeke's maybe got like about a year left or so, or maybe less than a year at this point in time, because they've got Porco is set to become the next Beast Titan. Admittedly, he does not have any royal blood, but they technically don't know that Zeke has royal blood at this point in time. But of course, we have the moment where, Gabby comes up with the plan of, I'm going to limp across the field, limp across this battlefield, and, without my uniform on or my armband on, and I'm going to pretend to be injured, and then, I can get close enough and I can throw these, bundle of grenades, throw them, and land them underneath the train when it comes down, because they're not going to shoot a kid. And it's either she talks to the captain. It's either, you either waste me as, one of your top warrior candidates, and, me and like a handful of these, pin grenades or whatever. And, I do that, and most you lose is that, or you can waste a ton of the other Eldians, to send them in. And thankfully her plan works. Well, I mean, thankfully for the fact that Gabby doesn't get shot, but she's able to succeed in that. And then of course they're able to take over this fort, and Reiner and Zeke show up, and they turn all these other Eldians that then fall from the sky into Titans. And we see Galliard running around, of course, yeah, I'm double checking my notes, I apologize. Colt Grice is Falco's older brother. Porco is the one that currently has the Jaw Titan. He's Marcel's brother. Okay. If you're one of the ones screaming at the video like, no, you're wrong, I apologize. I double checked my notes. I'm sorry. I haven't been as aware of this anime and manga as I am, like, when it comes to Digimon. I can do a lot of the names off the top of my head, and this is not as, it's not as drummed into my brain. So we got them. Gabby's plan works. They derail the train. Porco runs around as, the Jaw Titan and saves people and attacks. And then, they drop Reiner and Zeke and all these others from the plane and land them in the Fort Salva, whatever. And they overtake that, and then blah, 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 blah. And of course, Gabby and the rest, of course, are very happy that this worked. And, she's, on the train ride home, she's being, she's hailed as like their hero to the Eldians that are on the train and everything. And, Colt's drunk. And I think they probably gave Gabby some alcohol, which is probably not a wise decision. Yes, let's give a 13-year-old girl alcohol. Wonderful idea. Yes. But, they're all happy and everything. And we're introduced to Peak, who is, of course, the Cart Titan. This is where we get much more introduced to her. I like Peak. She's very smart, and she's rather blunt. But, of course, we get, them going back, and we have the moment where, like, Falco is watching what's going on with Gabby, with, her raised high on the men's shoulders and everything. And he's talking to Reiner. And Reiner, of course, we kind of know about Reiner's, like, personality problem. I would assume that since he's been back in Marley for the past, 4 years or so, that he hasn't particularly had to rely on the personality that has sympathy for the Eldians that much, particularly for like Aaron and the rest of the, scout recruits that were part of the group that he was with, his training corps. And I can kind of understand where that's coming from. I mean, he had to, he had this job that he had to do when he was on the island and everything, with as much as like him and Bertolt and Annie. And Bertolt even had some of the problem where he didn't want to fight against their friends either. Annie didn't really seem to have that problem, but her main focus was on, I want to get back to my father. Of course, we just see Annie, in either flashbacks in this season or her still trapped in the crystal, of course, because at one point we see Armin talking to her. And, so we get a lot of that issues, but we have a moment where Reiner and Falco talk, and Falco kind of makes the comment of, it's like something along the lines where it kind of like triggers something in Reiner where he's like, you don't think it's an honor to be able to inherit one of the Titan shifters? What is, what if I took, if you say that, and, then you and your, cult will be knocked out of here, you'll be knocked out of here, the rest of your family, you'll end up being turned into Titan, Sons of Paradis and turned into Titans, or dropped on the next enemy, whatever the case may be. And, he's scaring Falco, and I'm kind of more concerned about the fact, or I'm kind of more curious about the fact of, he also is trying to make, he's trying to motivate Falco in the fact of, you don't necessarily want the Titan power, but you don't want Gabby to get it because then Gabby only has 13 years to live. And instead of doing it to, deny yourself, use it as a way to try to protect Gabby, protect her from that fate. Gabby or Gabby. I'm just going to go with Gabby because that's just slightly more easier for me to pronounce. And if I'm pronouncing the name slightly differently than what they're normally pronounced as, I apologize. But of course, we have those moments there. And, Reiner, I think it's also Reiner doesn't want to see his own cousin die. I mean, he knows that it's going to end up being, at this point in time, he's aware of the fact that, okay, one of these 4 children, probably my own cousin, is going to be the one that's going to become the next Armor Titan, and they're going to devour me, about, 4 or 5 years from now or so, whenever this time, is almost run out, then they'll do it. The whole ceremony type thing. Yes, because it seems like such an honor to be turned into a mindless monster and then be basically tricked into eating someone that you kind of care about. I mean, in Gabby's case, she adores Reiner. That's one of the reasons why I'm pretty sure she's working so hard to do that. I mean, we know about the whole, your family game's honorary Marleyan status. We know that applied to Reiner's mother, and we get some flashbacks of this because at one point we have a flashback where Reiner goes and talks with his father, and his father just basically shuns him away and everything. Not that his father was necessarily prime parent material, but his mother was raised to honorary Marleyan status with him, and I don't know if that extended to his aunts and uncles and Gabby herself, because Reiner's armband is red. None of the other Eldians, most of the other Eldians all have yellow armbands except for the other shifters, because Zeke's is red, Peek's is red, Porco's is red. The rest of them are all just, yellow armbands to represent that they are the shifters, and that, their family has been given this status. So I would assume that it may not have extended to Gabby and her family, but Gabby and her, her parents, but, we'll see what happens with that. But, Gabby's doing it because, I don't know if it would necessarily mean as soon as, it would be a stupid deal if it's okay, your parents, your siblings, your parents or whatever get, raised to honorary Marleyan status from the time that you're the shifter. But the second you're no longer the shifter, I'm sorry, they go back to being regular Eldians, so they get 13 years of this, and then no. I would at least like to hope that, if Reiner had, if Reiner does get, I know Reiner doesn't get eaten, I know he makes it to the end, and blah, 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 and I know Gabby survives, and Falco survives. Porco, unfortunately, doesn't. I don't know about Colt. I don't remember if Colt survives or not. I like Colt. He seems smart, but I don't know if he actually survives all the way to the end. And I just double checked, and he does not, which I'm like, oh no, that's not fair. I kind of liked Colt. He was smart. But, he dies, unfortunately. But we know that, I think that it would just be a stupid deal if the second, you're no longer a shifter because you got eaten by the next shifter, that your parents or your family that were given the status, that it gets taken away from them. I would assume that would be staying even after you're gone. We also get some bits where they arrive back in Liberio, and of course they're all reunited with their families, and Falco ends up running into these other soldiers that basically have, for all intents and purposes, post-traumatic stress disorder, shell shock, whatever you want to refer to it as. One of the varying degrees of that, where, they keep getting triggered by different noises that they still think that they're on the battlefield. And he interacts with one of these Eldian warriors that later on identifies themselves as a Kruger. Yeah, it's Aaron, I know. It's Aaron in disguise. He's, grown his hair out over the last 3 years and everything. I do like that throughout the course of the season, we get some more flashbacks that kind of show how Aaron has kind of changed over the course of these 3 years, how he went, we see him kind of changing near the end of the 3rd season over that, that there's that year period between when Historia is crowned queen and then when they end up at the sea, because there's a couple of months in that time frame where winter happens and then they start moving out after they're pretty sure that all the Titans are gone, and they're just kind of I'm pretty sure they send out different scout groups at times just to make sure that all the Titans are actually dead, so that Marley isn't sending any more of them their way. And then, of course, they, they made their way to the sea. And Aaron has already started to kind of change by the end of the season, at the end of the third season. And it's very much, we kind of see more of that change go throughout the season, with the flashbacks. And I'll kind of go over those a little bit. Scatterbrain. But, they get back to Liberio. They're reunited with their families and everything. And, there's just all this, and Falco meets the Aaron in disguise, and he kind of ends up befriending him. And then, of course, we're introduced to the Tiber family, who are the holders of the Warhammer Titan. Now, we are informed that the Tibers are, of course, Eldians. They have to be Eldians if they have the Warhammer Titan. That they are actually Eldians that had formed one of their ancestors, I'm assuming one of the previous holders of the War Titan power, had made a deal with Marley. And we learn more in the past. We learn more throughout the rest of the season. And then, of course, it's kind of it's fake. They worked with a hero called Helios, which is, of course, reference to the Greek god of the sun. Not Apollo. This is like the actual god of the sun. Not Apollo with his chariot. Because Apollo was also the god of music. But we have, he was a hero that slayed these horrible titans, and then banished the titan, the Eldians and the Fritz and all of that away. And that the Tiber family are treated like royalty, unlike the rest of the Eldians. And of course, we learn that the Tiber family are actually the ones that are in control of Marley behind the scenes, as kind of stated between Willie Tiber, who's of course kind of the current head of the family, and him, and then this other guy that's kind of like the head of the Marleyan military at the moment, who, I don't particularly care for the guy that's the head of the Marleyan military at the moment. He's not a very nice person. He does seem to at least slightly care for the candidates, for the warrior candidates, and kind of have a bit of a back and forth with Zeke. But I don't particularly think he makes a comment later on in the season, or partway through the season, that kind of like, okay, yeah, he's like, he keeps calling all the Marleyans devil, or not the Marleyans, the Eldians devils, of course, because that's what all the Marleyans are raised to believe, that Eldians are devils, and of course Eldians are raised to believe that they're devils. Going all the way back to, Amir Fritz making that deal with the devil, and gaining this power of the Titans and everything, which of course in the second half of the season we'll actually get to see that full story unfold. I think one of the trailers has some bits of it in there already, where we see a young Amir with everybody pointing at her, and then of course I think we see a moment where we see like the weird spine thingy attaching itself to her when she falls into the tree. So we get some hints of that. And I think Zeke has like a flash of her at one point in the season, near the end of the season, which I'll talk about. Yes, because blowing yourself up is a wonderful idea, Zeke. But of course we get to see, the Marleyan military guy that kind of gets put in charge by Willie Tiber. He at one point he does say, yes, Eldians are devils, but, with everything that Marley has done and everything, we're devils too. Or something along those lines, where he admits that, no, we're horrible too. We've used the Titans to our own ends, between the shifters and turning the regular civilians into Titans for our own gains and everything, and we learn more about that. And of course, Falco keeps trying to find a way to one-up Gabby, of course. And given that they kind of interact at one point, the group, when they're returning from training one day, they interact with the guards at the gate into the internment zone. The guards seem to, these guards at least seem to like the cadets, the warrior candidates. I don't know if that just has to do with the fact of, they're warrior candidates, we might as well be nice to them. It's not like it's a big deal. Because I think that little, small perceptions of, maybe the Eldians, with so many of them with the warrior candidate program and everything, that maybe some of the stigma not is like going away, but like the guards may have shifted in that, like, they talk to the kids a lot. Um, and I can't assume that like every single guard that has been, in charge of this gate over the past 100 years or whatever, that the Eldians have been in this internment zone, that I can't assume that every single one of them completely and utterly hates the Eldians. I just find that hard to believe. Um, and these ones seem to at least be nice to the kids, so they at least get credit for that. And they like them and they tease them, and Gabby at one point gets angry because like Falco beat her in the race that day, and they're like, oh, well, that's pretty good there, Falco. When you keep that up, and you might be the one that gets the armor titan. Like Gabby just like freaks out about this, of course, and she's just like, no, I will be the one that gets to be the titan. I will be the one that gets that power. I will be the one to succeed Reiner, and blah 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 blah. And why is it that even matters to you? Why does my safety even matter to you? And of course, it's Falco's in love with her, and Gabby. Yeah, Falco's in love with Gabby. That's quite obvious to the other two warrior candidates, the guards, Reiner. Pretty sure Zeke can see it and Peek, and the rest of them can probably all see it. And we have a moment where there's a meeting that happens between like the shifters and such, Zeke and Peek and and Reiner and Colt, just because he's going to be the next Beast Titan, and Porco are all there. And they're all at this meeting and everything, and of course they're being listened in on, of course. And of course we find out from Peek that since she's been, when she's the cart titan for too long, when she's back in her human form, she has to relearn how to, of course, walk on two legs as opposed to crawling on all fours and everything. And we see her crawling on all fours or like laying down a lot, which I would assume, it's like, unless she's out in public, for the most part, I think she probably walks around on like all fours. Although, depending on the situation, we might get a little more of the case of, did I enter a horror movie? I don't like horror movies, but I just, if she's, crawling around on the floor at night and you wake up and you go into the hallway and you see her crawling, I would not blame Reiner or Zeke or Falco or whoever else for like squealing like a little girl if they see Gabby acting, if they see Peek doing that. And through flashbacks, we of course find out that Peek and Porco, of course, were part of the same class that Reiner and Bertolt and Annie and Marcel were, of course, in, and of course Marcel and Porco were brothers. Yeah, I messed it up at the beginning. I'm sorry. But of course, we deal with a lot of that. We get to see flashbacks of that. Reiner keeps having flashbacks to, seeing the four current candidates, seeing them flashback and seeing them as like him and Annie and Reiner, and Bertolt and such when they were kids. And they keep getting flashbacks of like Zeke, when he was, younger and everything, and helping train them and everything. We get flashbacks from Zeke throughout this arc. And, Falco ends up meeting, Mr. Kruger again at kind of the hospital. And Mr. Kruger, kind of, says, well, I kind of don't actually have a problem. I just don't really want to go home yet or back to the battlefield. And of course, he's missing a leg and everything, which is, I think, supposed to be a slight bit to throw us off, because it's like, well, he's missing a leg. Obviously, by this point in time, Aaron has learned to control his regeneration factor in regards to, his leg hasn't grown back. He either cut it off himself and then hit as one of the soldiers, or he just got hurt. Whatever. And he's got, bandages around his eye, and his hair is long and everything to like cover up part of his face. And, Aaron needs an extreme makeover Titan edition. That'd be funny. Yeah. I just had I listened to something earlier that was like talking to the recent winner of like RuPaul's Drag Race or whatever, Simone, I think. I don't really watch RuPaul's Drag Race, but I've seen bits of it and I know who RuPaul is. And I just had the image of like them trying to turn Erin into a drag queen. And I have no idea why I had that image in my head. Um, that would be an interesting concept. Moving on, sorry, but Aaron as Mr. Kruger kind of gains Falco's trust, and he's like, well, I can't mail these letters from inside the internment zone, so could you mail them from outside, because I don't want them reading them and wanting the government reading them and everything. So Falco runs them back to the military base, and he mails them for Aaron every now and then. And Aaron actually ends up meeting a doctor who is Dr. Yeager, who is actually Aaron's grandfather, Grisha's father, who he has a red armband, which, Zeke became a warrior. He became one of the warriors. He became the Beast Titan. Therefore, his grandparents, because they were his caretakers at the time, because he became the Beast Titan after Grisha and Dina were sent to the island, they, of course, have red armbands. We don't see Aaron's grandmother, but we do see Mr. Yeager. And he tells Aaron, you really shouldn't be doing that to him. Him and his brother, Colt, they had problems because their father had been in a cult, or were part of the revolutionists. And, they're kind of doing it to atone for those sins. They don't need any more sins on their plate. And you having him do that may cause him and his brother to, lose whatever gains that they've made. And I'm going to assume that probably one of their father or their uncle or something was probably one of the members of the same revolutionist sect that Grisha was part of. I don't know if that's ever specifically confirmed, but we see that at some point. But at one point we do, of course, get the moment where Aaron, but it's revealed that no, Dr. Yeager is not a doctor here anymore. He's actually a patient, and he seems to be one of the mental patients. Because he got out, and then some of the nurses come out and they kind of drag him back in. And then, of course, there's going to be this huge ceremony, because it's going to be that the Tiber family and the military are going to explain that, okay, we're going to this huge festival, and all of us are going to come together to become all these countries that used to be their enemies are all going to come together, and then we're going to all unite, and then we're going to go and attack and destroy Paradise, because our weapons, our technology has gotten strong enough. This, anti-Titan technology has gotten strong enough that we can go and we can destroy Paradise, and they won't have the ability to fight back, or won't be able to do it, nearly as easily as they used to, and we'll still be able to win. And, that's their plan. That's, the Tiber's plan. And of course, there's this big festival that's planned, and we get to the day of the festival, and we have all the kids running around eating stuff, and I love that writer, we just get this slight montage of all the kids, they taste ice cream, they taste pizza, they taste donuts or whatever, and they're like, oh my god, this is the best food I've ever eaten. And we just see clip after clip after clip of Ryder in the background paying the food stalls. And then all the kids are just food, food, food. I just found that so funny. Pizza, ice cream, donuts, whatever else. And Gabby eats too much and everything. And we get the moment where, of course, Willie Tiber is going to be making this big announcement. Now, the night before, there had been kind of this dinner party type thing, and the 4 warrior candidates were all the bus boys, and the other male warrior candidate, not Falco, but the other boy who I cannot remember what his name is. I apologize. He unfortunately spilled some wine on a dress of a lady that looked, on a kimono of a lady that looks to be from one of the Asian countries that's, that they're familiar with. And she actually plays it off as she's the one that spilled it on her, and that he was being very nice and trying to help her, which throws him off. And rightfully so. I mean, all his life, I mean, like, he was probably prepared to, like, her flip out at him and blame him for, dumping this wine on her and, dishonoring her, why did this demon child touch me and everything? But she didn't. She was very nice about it, and she just like, no, it was my fault. I just accidentally spilled some wine. He was being a very good boy and going to go get something to help clean it up and everything. And he's just like befuddled by this, and so are the other warrior candidates. But it's revealed that she's a friend of Willie Tiber, and Tiber has actually been going. Well, the Tiber family, this generation, has been going around and making lots of allies with other countries and such. Um, Gaining favor with other countries and such, and he's actually more popular than like the current leader of Marley. And the night of the festival, he's going to put on kind of this performance thing where he shows them, he kind of explains to them, Helios was fake, and there's these wall titans all over, the rumbling and everything that it's going to happen if, like, the founding titan awakens, all these wall titans that are colossus-sized titans and sends them out into the world. They'll just like stomp and destroy everything. And he's like explaining this, and he's like, well, kind of that's a lie. King Fritz and my ancestors actually made a deal that us Tiber family will go and join Marley, and kind of end up running Marley behind the scenes, of course, and we'll make up this hero named Helios that came and destroyed the Titans, and that Karl Fritz, he's actually, he made this vow type thing, will of the first king, whatever you want to refer to it as, first king of the walls, 154th, 45th, whatever king, it's, that of the Eldian Empire that, prevents the, if the founding titan has someone of royal blood, is, the bearer of it, then they can't actually go against the first king's will. I'm going to make a video about that, and I'm going to give more of my explanation of why that is complete and utter BS. But that'll be a different video. And what ends up happening, of course, is, Willie Tiber does this whole performance type thing, which I'll give the man credit. He's got flair. I'll give him that. But he, it's like he knows that he's going to die that night. He like says goodbye to his wife and his children and his what appear to be his grandparents, and him and his sister are the ones that goes. We, of course, those that have read the manga and such, of course, are aware of the fact that he's not actually the one with the Warhammer Titan. It's actually his sister that has the Warhammer Titan. And at the big performance and everything, because the warrior candidates are there, Falco actually takes Reiner off, and he takes him into one of these civilian buildings that's overlooking the stage, and he brings him into the bottom area, and he shows him to Mr. Kruger, and he explains, well, Mr. Kruger said that he was an old friend of yours, and he just wanted to talk to you and everything. And then, of course, Aaron like undoes the bandages on his leg, and his leg starts healing, and he's just like looking at Reiner, and Reiner realizes, of course, that it's Aaron, and like they sit. And there was a moment earlier in the show where like Reiner has like a gun in his mouth ready to pull the trigger and end himself. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that for the past 4 years, Reiner's been having a lot of internal struggle in regards to he cared about Aaron and the rest of the people that were part of his Survey Corps group, that were part of his training group. He cared about them so much, and he saw these people in on Paradise that were just normal people, just trying to live their lives for the most part. And that, the Eldians were just trying to protect themselves from the Titans and everything, but that goes against everything that he was raised to believe of how horrible the Eldians were, and that Marley were the good ones, and that he has to do what he must to, ensure Marley's success, succeeds. And, we see that struggle still going on in his head. And Gabby doesn't really have that struggle because, all she's been raised to know is, of course, what the Marleyans want her to know and what her parents have taught her about how horrible the Eldians were. And, so we get a lot of that, unfortunately. And, Reiner and, Reiner and Aaron talk, and Falco's there, and he's like figuring out that, oh, I did something I really shouldn't have. That's not good. And I do feel sorry for Falco in this case because he was basically just manipulated by Eren. And, you know, Aaron's, of course, plan is, you know, when, Willie Tiber's done with his, like, whole performance art thing, at the very least, he didn't use interpretive dance. I don't think that would have been a very good idea. Although I do like his use of, like, shadow puppets and, he did good. He's good. If he survived, he could have had he maybe he was a theater major at whatever version of like Marley University is. um, he went and became like a theater star. Um, Maybe I don't know. But of course, what ends up happening is, of course, Eren, after he finishes his speech, Eren, you know, activates his power and transforms and ends up unfortunately killing and hurting a lot of the people that were, of course, in the building. And, that were like Eldians because it was held in the internment zone. So it was like a lot of Eldians that were there. And of course, there's like people in the audience that are, of course, from all over the world, dignitaries and reporters and everything. And of course, it's Willie's anticipation that, it'll make, sympathy for like the ones that are in Liberio because they were not the ones that caused this problem. It was, Titans from the outside. It was the people from Paradise. And that they're the ones that killed, that attacked and killed these, killed the dignitaries and everything, and the high-ranking Marleyan military. And so Eren does that, but before that happened, it was soldier came over and he like pulled away like it was Peak and Porco pulled them away and took them somewhere else and dropped them down a hole. You of course find out later that this is Elena. Elena is interesting. Elena has her own issues. But of course, and this is of course when, Eren's transformed and he transforms and attacks the stage and he, devours Willie Tiber. And of course, he doesn't gain the power then. So he's like, okay, well, it wasn't that Tiber that had the power. And of course, this is when we see Willie Tiber's sister transform and she changes into the Armor Titan. Or not the Armor Titan, she changes into the Warhammer Titan, which I do like. I do like the aesthetics of the Warhammer Titan, and I like the powers that it can use in regards to, forming weapons out of kind of like the hardening type stuff and using those. A very, very useful thing. And of course, what ends up happening is, this is when, Mikasa and a bunch of the other scouts show up. Because, Eren was sending them letters about what he's planning on doing, of course. And he's using it as a way to, like, lure them in to use him to attack Marley and everything. And, they show up and they're just, they're causing a ton of problems. They're trying to, Mikasa's trying to stop Eren in all honesty. And Eren's trying to fight the Warhammer Titan, who's, making all these different weapons and everything. And he's figuring out that, oh, she's not inside of the Titan. She's under the ground, and he digs her out of the ground, and he pulls up this, this crystal cocoon that's like what Annie's in. And, he tries biting it, and that doesn't work. And then, of course, Peak and Porco show up, and they start running around. Peak's got her, armor, her armor on for her cart titan to protect her, and she's running around with that. And Peak, she's doing that, and Falco and Porco's running around, and, Eren, of course, ends up using via him and Mikasa kind of dismembering Porco. They use him to, use his jaws to like crush the crystal cocoon that, of course, we find out later that her name is Laura Tiber, who's, Willie Tiber's younger sister, uses that to like crush that. So it, crushes her and kills her in the cocoon, and then Eren drinks her spinal fluid, and then he's able to, of course, he gains the power of the Warhammer Titan. And of course, out in the bay, we of course have the moment where Armin changes into his Colossal Titan, which is where we first get to see him as his Colossal Titan form, and he like kind of blows up the Marleyan ships that are there, so that kind of makes it harder for them to be able to chase after them so quickly. And then of course we see that there's that the Paradise people, the Eldian Empire, Eldian Nation, whatever you refer to them, now have like the ability to have like flying ships. And we're introduced to a new character who it takes me a little while to be able to figure out his name, but it's Anyan Capone, and I apologize if I mispronounced it. Um, and he's there with Hodge and with Armin, and they're flying the ship down, and we have the rest of the scouts running around along with a whole bunch of the other recruits and everything, because like Sasha's there. Oh, Sasha. Jean's there. Connie's there. Flock is there. And a bunch of the others are there, and they're all run around. They're setting up these lights to like lead the way for like the ship to come down, to fly down, so they can jump on and off of the ship and like swing around and everything. And they're getting everybody on the ship, and like they fight Zeke, and like I think Levi's there, and of course Levi's going after Zeke. And they get Aaron onto the ship and everything, and they're all getting onto the ship and everything. And like Sasha at one point had ended up killing the two guards that were kind of like Gabby and Falco's friends. Of course, unfortunately, the other two warrior candidates unfortunately died, and Colt's there. But he's okay. But Gabby and Falco end up, they're running away, and Gabby's trying to go after them, of course, because she wants to get revenge on Aaron, because on any of the Eldians, because they're the ones that killed a ton of their people, killed their civilians, destroyed this thing, trying to rule the world's opinions of Eldians and everything, because in her mind, all the Eldians that are here in Liberia, we're the good Eldians. They're the bad Eldians. They're the ones that needs to be punished. We are the good ones. We are the ones trying to atone. And of course, that's just been drummed into her entire life, unfortunately. And of course, Peak unfortunately got injured. And, we just have this whole issue that happens with, them running around, and Peak, Gabby and Falco end up getting onto the airship that, the squad is on, and they get onto the airship, and, everybody's happy and everything because they're leaving, and Gabby, unfortunately, shoots Sasha. And they haul Gabby and Falco in. Some of them are about ready to throw them off the ship, and Jean's like, no, we're leaving, and they're also children. We're not going to throw children from an airship. We're not that. And Sasha is, of course, unfortunately, bleeding out, and they don't unfortunately have the equipment to be able to, they don't have the ability to like stop her bleeding and everything. And they take Gabby and Falco into the room where they find that Aaron's there, and then they find that Zeke is there. And we get the moment where they say these two the girl shot Sasha and everything, and she's fighting for her life. And then Connie comes in, and he's like, Sasha's dead. And oh God, that did hurt. Because I liked Sasha a lot, and I kind of knew that she didn't make it, but I still didn't like that, and I really like Sasha. Why couldn't Gabby have shot Flock? And so unfortunately there was that moment, and then of course Mikasa and Armin run out, and like they're crying over Sasha's body, trying, don't die type of a thing. And so I think it's one of the few times where we actually see Mikasa cry. Armin crying isn't necessarily unheard of, but as we see them crying, and Aaron laughs because he remembers that Sasha, the last thing that she had said was she had wanted meat, she was hungry and everything, and because Sasha's always thinking about food. And Aaron just starts laughing because he remembered, right before the Colossal Titan attacked the second time, that Sasha had stolen a bunch of, stolen meat to share with everyone. And, so it's not a fun moment when, when Sasha's gone. That's not fun by any means. As I said, I really liked Sasha. And of course, they're not going to kill Gabby and Falco. They lock them up, and, Zeke's there. And he kind of, it's kind of revealed that Zeke let himself be captured. And, and then, of course, we, return to Paradise, and we have the moments where, of course, we find out that, oh, yeah, 3 years ago, one of those ships that you sent had a whole bunch of spies on it that were sent by Zeke. There are some people that are loyal to Zeke, these anti-Marleyan volunteers that want to see the Marleyan Empire fall because Marley has, used the Titans to go up against their people and used to conquer their people, and they want to free their people from the Marleyan Empire. And, so there's that, and we're introduced to Elena, and we're introduced to Anyan Capone some more, and that him and Hodge seem to have a good relationship. Nobody seems to quite 100% trust Elena, or Yelena, whichever one you refer to her as. I apologize if I mispronounced it one way or the other. They get back and they report everything to the Marleyan military. We've learned that over the past 3 years, they were able to, they captured the Marleyan military that came on those ships, with, several of them, surrendering, of course. And then, of course, they started to use the technology that was there, and they learned about like trains and different types of, radios and like all this other technology and everything. And they've started to build like train tracks and trains and everything that they use to like travel over the island and everything to use for trading. And, Aaron and the group helped build them. And at one point we get a flashback where we have it that like Aaron and the group are talking on, after they were, finished, building on some of the train tracks for the day. Because Aaron's like, well, we can train our body and we can help Eldia at the same time. And everybody's like, why did you volunteer us for this, Aaron? Why? I don't want to have to stand out in the sun for hours all day and pound train tracks and spikes into the ground. But, we have Aaron and them talking, and they're like, well, we're going to need to figure out who's going to inherit Aaron's Titan, because it's, it's been long enough that it's kind of the point where they have to start figuring out, because he's got about 4 or 5 years left or so. Like, well, we got to figure out when we're going to, when we're going to, who's going to be the one to get it. And like, Mika says like, well, it should be me. And they're like, well, first of all, we don't know if Ackermans can even be turned into Titans. Second of all, you're royalty from another country, because we found out that the Asian country, that's the same country that the lady that had wine spilled on her was from, that Mikasa is actually a descendant of the shogun of their country. So yeah, Mikasa's royalty. That her, I'm assuming like grandfather or possible great grandfather, I don't know exactly if we get the exact lineage there, but that he was the shogun of the country, and that Mikasa has this like thing, 3 katanas like overlapping in like a triangle and a circle carved on her wrist that she's kept hidden for like the entire season up to this, the entire series up to this point, except from Aaron. And they find out that, oh well, Mikasa is actually the descendant of the shogun, and that she has the right to go and rule over this country and everything. And they make a deal with this other country, and the ambassador from the country and everything. And like they've upgraded their Marleyan technology, or they've upgraded their Eldian technology, their omnidirectional gear and everything, their ODM gear and everything. And what ends up happening is, they're like, well, Connie or Jean's like, well, maybe I should be the one that should inherit the Titan, blah, 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 reasons. And then Connie's like, no, it should be me, blah, 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 reasons. And then Sasha's like, no, it should be me, blah, 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 reasons. And then Aaron's like, no, I don't want it to be any of you, because I care about all of you. He didn't want it to be Historia that got the power either, because, they would just, they find out from Zeke, because Zeke, via his spies, Elena and Anyan Capone and such, he had sent information that, I have a plan that would involve me and Aaron, and, we use him to activate the rumbling, or to do a test of the rumbling, and then, we use that to, demonstrate to the world Eldia's, that Eldia still has this power, and it's still a force to be reckoned with, and it'll, make them leave you alone for however long. And, we make these right allies and everything. And, but we need that. And then, of course, you need a Titan of royal blood and everything. So, you get Historia to have a bunch of kids to just keep passing down that Titan power and such. And, and of course, we learn in the season that, of course, Historia got married at some point in the last 3 years. And that her husband is just like, he's kind of like a farmhand. He apparently, from the little bit that I heard, he was from the little bit that they mentioned, it's because they have a whole bunch of like high-ranking military men at one of these restaurants, And they're all talking about like kind of like talking about his story behind her back, and she's like, well, she married this, this farmhand guy and everything. Like, they're drunk, and I was like, well, she married this farmhand guy and everything, and she just got pregnant because she didn't want to have to, inherit the Titan so soon and everything from Zeke, and blah blah blah. And the man that History married had been, unfortunately, one of the boys who, when she was growing up on her, on her grandparents' farm, he had been one of the boys that would like throw rocks at her over the fence. And that when she set up her orphanage, he was like one of the first ones that showed up to work there. I guess kind of in his mind as penance. And they, I would assume, somewhere between fell into love and fell into, I guess, maybe mutual attraction. Um, Given the fact that he does seem to be very concerned about Historia, keep her healthy and everything, and Historia doesn't quite seem to be the person that's going to just marry someone just to have a child. I'm pretty sure that if she would have been perfectly happy with marrying Amir, and then maybe like finding like sperm donor. Um, eh. But that's not the case, and Historia is pregnant. We see her pregnant at one point, and we see her husband and everything. But we find out that a lot of these restaurants, because Elena had kind of worked for the Marleyan citizen rights or type things. They have like POWs that are working with them and everything, that are Marleyan POWs from the ships. And a lot of them, like, they're chefs and they're working in restaurants and everything. And one of them is a chef named Niccolo. And he had ended up becoming friends with Sasha because when they first arrived and they interact with the scouts and everything, Sasha, he makes a bunch of this food, seafood type stuff that's, all these like Marleyan delicacies, and he makes it for them. And Sasha just like eats part of it, and she's just like, oh, this is the most amazing food I've ever had. And she just like scarfs it all down, and like he's just like befuddled by her, and like he's just like so happy the fact that she likes this food so much. And like they just had a fun relationship. They had a very nice relationship. And and we find out, of course, Sasha died, unfortunately, and he shows up at the grave, at the cemetery, and he's unfortunately attacked by one of the other guards that's there, and he's like, "What are you doing here? Marley scum or whatever. This is the graveyard for the people, for the graveyard for for the resting place of the people you killed." And they're like, like Jean and Connie run over and they stop the guard, and they like take, they take Niccolo to Sasha's grave, and he gives flowers and everything at her funeral. And I think Mikasa's there, and she witnesses it too. And then, of course, we have the moment where, Sasha's father shows up along with, I'm assuming the woman is Sasha's mother, along with some of the other like foster children that he's taken in, and the girl Kaya, who, of course, we learn is the same girl that, Sasha saved from the Titan back in season 2, that she, fought off the Titan to allow Kaya time to escape. When Sasha used her bow and arrow against the Titan, which I still is just like, yes, do that. Just give her an entire barrel of cooked potatoes and she'll be happy. That's her reward, and then like an entire barrel of meat for doing that. Sasha would adore anyone that gave her that. Entire barrel of like cooked potatoes, an entire barrel of like cooked meat. She would love that. That's your reward for helping take down this Titan with a bow and arrow. Yay! But Niccolo meets Mr. Browse, and he's like, I didn't know your daughter very long, but she was my friend, and I work at one of these restaurants, and if you come and you bring your family, I will make a meal for you that I had wanted to make for Sasha, and I didn't get the chance to. And, and Mr. Browse takes him up on that. And, Gabby and Falco were brought back to the island, and Gabby and Falco escape because Gabby attacks a guard, and she drags Falco out, and they end up in the woods. And there's a moment where, like, they're like, they're, kind of getting out of their kind of like prisoner clothes or whatever. And Falco's like, well, you can't have that armband on. You have to get rid of it. And she's like, no, the people here don't even know what it means. And he's like, but it'll make you stand out. You have to get rid of it. And she's like, no, because it marks me as one of the good Eldians. And it's still that whole, the brainwashing thing. It marks me as it makes me as better than them. I'm above them. I'm not one of these horrible island devils, as they keep getting referred to as. And, she still hides the the armband, and then of course they, Kaya finds them, and she's like, well, you can come to our farm and everything. I won't ask you what's going on. And they just pretend to be two like runaways. Like Falco says his name is Ben, and that Gabby's his sister Mia. And they're like, she's like, well, you can come and stay at the farm. I'm sure Mr. Browse will be perfectly fine with having you here for a while and everything. There's plenty of stuff that you can help with, and we've got food. That's not a problem. And they go with her, and what ends up happening is, what ends up, we just get this, this moment where we, of course, find out that, Mr. Browse is, of course, the one that's in charge of this kind of farm now. They seem to be raising horses. And they've got a lot of other people there that work with them that are maybe like former or that they're orphans, or maybe from the orphanage that like Historia had started. Other orphanage as well, from other people who had, other children who had lost their parents to Titans before everything happened. Bring them into that way. And what ends up happening is, they're very nice to them and everything. And, later on, Kaya just basically reveals, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can tell that you guys are from Eldia and everything because of the way that you act and everything. And, we're going to go to this restaurant in town because it's run by some people who are from Marley, and they can maybe help you find a way to get home and such, because like, Mr. Browse is, kind of going to, go there because, one of them was friends with his daughter. And, they could have very much easily avoided some of this because I'm, pretty sure that Gabby and Falco heard Sasha's name at some point in the time frame when they were on the airship, hearing that, Sasha was the one that they had killed. They didn't hear her last name, but I'm pretty sure they heard her name. And if Kaya or if Mr. Browse or Kaya had just simply said Sasha's name, then Falco and Gabby probably wouldn't have ended up in necessarily the situation that they were in. But Gabby, of course, at one point tries to attack Kaya, and Kaya just, Falco stops her, and like Kaya just kind of like waves it off, type of a thing. And they go to the restaurant, and there's other stuff going on with Aaron. Aaron's going way down the emo path and everything, like they have him locked up. And then of course they have a moment where it's like they have all these, the Jaegerists, and they want, the Jaegerists, there's just like Flock and a whole bunch of these others that are like working with Elena, and they want to get, Aaron and Zeke to meet, so that way, they can activate the rumbling and everything, because reasons. And they have issues. And we, of course, the Browse family plus Gabby and Falco go to the restaurant, and Niccolo made this very nice meal for them, and they're all eating and everything. And then Gabby and Falco kind of like try to sneak off, and they find Niccolo, and they're trying to explain to him, well, at the same time that the Browse family is there, Haj and Jean and Connie and Mikasa and Armin showed up. Mikasa and Armin had tried to convince, don't remember what his name is, but he was like the head guy of the entire military. I don't remember what his name is off the top of my head. It's not Pixis. It was like whoever was above Pixis. Tried to convince him to let them talk to Aaron, and then of course his office blows up with him inside of it. And a bunch of cadets that are in it at the same time, they all get blown up. And so, yeah, that's done by the Jaegerists. And, we find out that there's more scouts that are involved, that, they leaked more information to the press, and that there's, this information about, Aaron can do this and everything. And so there's lots of people that are like, well, why aren't you just letting Aaron do that, and letting Zeke and Aaron do this, and like all this other stuff. And it's all part of, Zeke's plan, and part of, Elena's plan, and kind of Aaron's plan too, although he's claiming that he's not doing it by someone manipulating him. And of course, we find out in the manga and such in the final chapter that, no, Aaron is perfectly aware of what he's doing. He's just being an a-hole about it and not understanding the concept of, okay, maybe there's a better way of doing this that involves less people dying and less anarchy. I keep running through stuff in my head. I'm like, well, I know that there has to be a better way of doing this that involves less people dying, and that might be like something I put in a video. We'll see. But, Haj and her group show up where, Zeke and, like, Levi has, like, Zeke off in the woods somewhere with a bunch of his men, um, keeping an eye on Zeke and everything. And it's supposedly been about a month, or so, I think, maybe. I don't know exactly if they state the exact amount of time it's been since they got there, but Levi's there with his men and has Zeke in the forest. And, Haj and her group show up because Haj is now the commander of the scouts at this point in time. Instead of, Ervin was the commander. He's unfortunately dead, of course, and, we know this. And, Haj is now in command, and Levi is, I'm assuming, like, second in command or something. And, of course, the rest of the group has, like, worked their way up in ranks and everything, like, have their own squads, probably. And they get to the restaurant, and Jean wanted to drink some of this wine, and Niccolo stops him. He's like, "No, this would be wasted on an Eldian scum like you." And like they've interacted with Niccolo several times, and he hasn't acted this way, and it's very, very abrupt in his shift. And he takes the wine downstairs, and it's like they said that the wine was only supposed to be drank by like the Eldian MPs, the high ranking MPs and stuff like that. And he, he takes it down to the wine cellar, and Gabby and Falco sneak after him, and they explain, blah, 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 blah. We're actually, part of the Eldian warrior candidates and everything. You need to help us get back to Eldia and everything. And Gabby, blurts out that she's the one that killed Sasha, and Niccolo snaps, and he tries to, whack Gabby with the wine bottle, and Falco gets in the way and blocks it. And, Falco unfortunately gets some of the wine in his mouth, which of course we know that that's not a good thing. And Niccolo unfortunately kind of beats both of them, and then he drags them up to the dining room where the Browse family is. And Mr. Browse is like, "Niccolo, what is wrong with you? Why are what happened to Ben and Mina?" And he's just like, "This girl," throws Gabby on the ground, "is the one that killed Sasha. She's the reason Sasha's dead." And everything, and like the rest of the family is just like watching, and like the rest of the squad runs in, and they're just like, they recognize Gabby and Falco right away, of course. And Niccolo is basically, for all intents and purposes, I'm pretty sure Niccolo is about ready to either slice Falco's neck or slice Gabby's neck, one of the two. And he gives the knife to Mr. Browse, and he's like, "You were Sasha's father. You have the right to do this more than I do." And, Mr. Browse takes the knife, and I'm pretty sure the thought did go through his head of, "You're the one that took my daughter away from me." And I could, he's a hunter by trade. He knows how to end things very quickly for animals, and he's got the knife. And I'm pretty sure the thought did run through his head of, "You were the one that took my daughter from me. I have every right to want you dead, to kill you and end your life, in cold blood to a degree the way that you killed her." But he doesn't. He hands the knife to his wife, and he's like, "No," and he does this great speech, and I think I'm going to be using that speech for like the end quote on this video. And it's like, it's like, I trained Sasha how to hunt in our forest, and then I sent her off to a bigger forest to teach her how to, work with other people, and and then it grew, and then and now we just have to find a way to get these children out of the forest, so that way they have the ability to be children again, to actually just grow up and be children and be happy and be carefree the way that children are supposed to be, and that we have to get them out of this dark place, this dark forest." And he doesn't want to kill Gabby. He's like, this cycle of hatred is not going to work. An eye for an eye, me killing you just because you killed my daughter is just going to make someone else want to kill me because I killed you, and then make my family want to kill them because they killed me, and it's just a never-ending cycle. And Niccolo watches this, and he accepts it. It speaks truth to his character. Niccolo was not a soldier. He was a cook. he was a cook and he wanted to cook food, and Sasha was like the person that had like was like the happiest he ever saw eating his food was Sasha. And Kaya had made the comment that she thought that like Niccolo probably was like in love with Sasha. And I don't remember off the top of my head if Niccolo survives. I'll wait and actually probably find that out when I watch the actual season. Um, but we know Sasha didn't survive, unfortunately, but I think that that would have been like a nice ending of, and if Sasha hadn't died, if Sasha had lived, of course, then if Sasha had lived, then we wouldn't get this scene where Gabby starts to realize that no, everybody on this island are not devils. They're not what you were raised to believe. They're good people. They're normal people that just want to live and have a family. And, Niccolo, he puts down Falco, and, Hodge and the rest of them come in. He's like, you should probably wash the boy's mouth out because he drank some of the wine, and he explains that, well, I don't know for certain, but we brought a lot more wine with us on that ship than we would have normally, and I think that it's been infused with like Zeke's spinal fluid because if someone of Eldian descent either is injected with the spinal fluid or ingests it, I'm assuming no matter the amount of, I mean, like, I don't know if it's like if you ingested it like a year ago, does that like stay in your body and then you can still be turned into a Titan by Zeke's yell, or is that only something that like within a certain amount of time that it's been in your body, and like, or does your body metabolize it out? I don't know exactly. Um, but like, you know, it's been given to all these high-ranking officials all over Eldia and everything, and you know, so that's like Pixis and a whole bunch of these other ones have been drinking this wine, and a bunch of the wine got sent with Levi and his group that's guarding Zeke, and of course Zeke uses that to turn all of them into Titans, and then of course Levi then this is where part of a lot of this is all going at the same time. Zeke then has to slaughter his own men that were turned into Titans to go after Zeke, and he he got Zeke, and he had basically got Zeke pinned and everything to the point where he keeps because if you keep the person that's a shifter, if you keep cutting off parts of them so they can't regenerate, because if they're whole then they can turn into their Titan form, but if they're not whole then they can't their body focuses on the regeneration, not on transforming. And so he's like, well, Levi just basically keeps hacking off parts of him, and then he like shoves one of the thunder spears into Zeke's stomach, and then has it like the cord is tied around Zeke's neck, so if Zeke moves too much, then it'll activate the thunder spear and blow Zeke up, which we know happens. And we get more of Zeke's flashback, but I'm going to finish what happens at the restaurant first, and then I'll go into Zeke's flashback. And it's revealed that they've done this kind of tactic before where they get a whole bunch of Eldians to like ingest Zeke's spinal fluid, and then like overnight they'll make a ton of Titans appear in a place where Titans weren't before, and the military has used this tactic. And Niccolo is like trying to explain to them as much as he knows, and then of course Eren has escaped, and there's the Jaegerists, as I mentioned. And like Eren finds them, and we get the cool pose of like him putting on this like jacket and everything with like it blowing in the wind. And of course Flock is one of the head of the Jaegerists, and then of course there's Elena and a bunch of the other anti-Marleyan volunteers. And Onion Capone seems to be kind of the one that's not doesn't agree with what Elena is trying to do. He seems to kind of be on like Hodge's side and the Scout's side, but I don't 100% know exactly what happens to Onion Capone in the end. And of course, at this point in time, like Peak has like snuck her way into the country because she's trying to find Gabby and Falco. And of course, the Marleyans are on their way to attack and everything. And because if they wait too long, then Eldians will have the ability to like build up stuff on their island, and then the restaurant, this is where, Elena and Flock and, Aaron show up at the restaurant, and Aaron and Armin and Mikasa sit down, and like Gabby's there too. And, Gabby is already kind of have like an internal morality issue going on in her head with what she just witnessed with, Mr. Browse. And instead of Mr. Browse trying to kill her, and then it being like, Kaya had grabbed a knife and tried to stab Gabby, but, Mikasa stopped her. And, because it's like, you killed Sasha, you're the one that killed my sister, because, Mr. Browse had adopted Kaya because her mother was killed by a Titan. And, Sasha had been Kaya's sister for kind of like the last 3.5 to 4 years or so. And Kaya very much seemed to adore Sasha. And, we get other moments, and of course Aaron and Mikasa and Armin sit down, like Gabby's kind of there off to the side, and like Aaron just sitting there with like his hand bleeding onto the table, because he's like, basically the thing of, I can transform at any moment. I could blow up this entire building. And like he's explaining to Armin, it's like, you have the enemy inside of your head this entire time. You've had Bertolt inside of your head the entire time. You keep going and talking to Annie and everything. That's not you that wants to talk to her. That's Bertolt. That's her companion that wants to talk to her. And he's looking at Mikasa, and he's like, your family, the Ackerman line was, bred to be able to serve, the royal Eldians, the Fritz line and everything, and the Reese line. You were raised to be able to serve them and protect them, and that, your instincts just, imprinted on me instead, and now you have no choice but to protect me, and that, it's not your own choice. And it's, it's the horrible moments, at one point, Armin tries to punch Aaron, but then Mikasa pins him, and then Armin does end up punching Aaron multiple times. And oh God. And then, of course, they the rest of the group get, locked up in the bottom of, because for some reason there's a cell in the bottom of the restaurant, I think, or whatever. And, they're using kind of like Hodge as a captive, and they're like, forcing the military to do what they want, because, they could be turned into Titans at any given time. And the Jaegerists are using that, and, it's just, the country is about to go into complete chaos and everything. And of course, at the end of it, Peak shows up, and she tried to save Gabby and Falco, and Aaron, she pretended that to Aaron, it's like, I don't trust the, I'm not in this for Marley. I'm in this for me and for my father and for Eldia, and that I will do whatever it takes to let, Eldians survive and everything. And, I don't care what happens to Marley and everything. And part of that is true, because Pete tells Gabby that, I don't care what happens to Marley. I don't trust Marley, but I trust my comrades that have fought beside me. The guys that had been, that were a part of the ones that are on the, her unit when she's, in her Cart Titan mode, and she has like the anti-Titan armor and everything on it. The ones that are inside of that armor at the time that control her, cannons and such like that. Those ones are ones that she trusts. And, Zeke and the other, Zeke and Reiner and Colt and Falco and Gabby and, Porco and such, like, they're the ones that she trusts. And she tries to trick Aaron. And, Aaron's basically prepared for whatever's going to happen. Pretty sure. But, we get the flashback with Zeke where he's, remembering when he was a kid, being in the warrior program, and how much pressure that his parents were putting on him, and that he was getting, mixed signals between what his parents were teaching him and what he was learning in school, and what he was learning in the warrior program, and what his grandparents were teaching him. And, he was not the highest, he was not the most likely candidate in regards to becoming the one that would inherit the Beast Titan or any of the Titans. And then he meets this doctor, and the doctor explains to, the doctor that's a scientist for Marley, who is an Eldian. He is the current, at the time, he was the current holder of the Beast Titan. And he wasn't a warrior by any means. I think he had been the one that had the Titan, that had that specific Titan power, simply just because, they could still use his spinal fluid and everything, but I guess at the time, Marley wasn't necessarily at war at the time, so they didn't necessarily need him entirely to be a warrior. He was a scientist. and he was, loyal to Marley. And we find out, the horrible fact about his past, that, he had been married to a woman who had been of Marleyan descent, and she didn't know that he was an Eldian. And then when he, became a warrior, he went home and he told her that he had been the one, chosen to become the next warrior. And he told her this, and she, they had a son, and she kills herself and their son. And, you know, he bonds with Zeke. He plays baseball with Zeke, the pitching back and forth. And, he's the one that, when Zeke finds out, his parents are part of this revolution and everything, he tells the doctor, and he's like, well, the doctor is like freaking out. He's like, well, if they find out about that, then they're not just going to send your parents to Paradise. They're going to send you too, and your grandparents and everyone. And if you're going to protect your grandparents and yourself, then you're going to need to have to turn in your parents. And he's the one that convinces Zeke. I mean, he's developed a relationship with Zeke, and he cares for Zeke. So I don't necessarily blame him in regards to wanting to not lose Zeke. He already lost his own son and his wife to ignorance, in all honesty. But he doesn't want to see that happen to Zeke. And, he convinces Zeke that, you need to tell the Marleyans, you need to tell the military that, your parents are the ones that are part of this uprising and everything, and then that'll protect you. And that fact alone may not have been exactly what got it that Zeke was the one that inherited the Beast Titan in the end, but it probably had helped. And, so we still get those moments, and, we have a moment where, like, Grisha, when Zeke is still a kid, before everything happens with the warrior programs, Grisha and Dina and Zeke, they had been out among the Marleyans, and they kept getting, stuff thrown at them. And Grisha's like, you need to remember how this feels, Zeke. You need to remember this hatred. This is what the world thinks of us, and you need to find a way to stop it. I'm like, don't put that type of pressure on a child. And admittedly, Grisha puts way too much pressure onto Zeke. He's like, he pushes him and pushes him and pushes him and pushes him. And, Dina kind of tries to get him to back off, but it doesn't exactly work. And, his parents are trying to get him to back off and just let Zeke be a kid. And it's a lot that happens in regards to that. And no, Grisha was not a good father. I would say he may have been a bit of a better father to Eren than he was to Zeke, but not necessarily by much. I mean, he still turned his son into a Titan and then made his son eat him. So, yeah. I wouldn't necessarily put that as, oh, yeah, no, Grisha's a Father of the Year material. No. And yeah, I did the Mother's Day video for One Piece, and I'm going to do a Father's Day video for One Piece as well, along with a Brother's Day and a Sister's Day and a Grandparents' Day. But I don't think I'm going to be doing that for Attack on Titan because, Grisha is not the best father. Rod's not a good father. Reiner's father's not a good father. Not really a whole lot of awesome fathers. I mean, like, I would guess maybe, like, the best father that we've seen in Attack on Titan would kind of be, Sasha's father with Mr. Browse. I would kind of put that towards the best one. And the thing is that Zeke looked at this doctor because, he looked at the doctor as his father, because he was there for Zeke through everything else. After, Grisha and Dina were sent off to Paradise, he was there for Zeke and for Zeke's grandparents and everything. And so, we get that whole flashback with Zeke, and that's, when he pulls the pin with his neck on the Thunder Spear to, blow himself up, to blow up Levi in the process. And we know Levi survives. I know that Levi survives, because I know that he's in the last chapter, and then he ends up getting, kind of taken care of by Gabby and Falco in the end. But, then, Zeke kind of, I guess, uses his ability to control Titans to have another Titan come up and, rips open its own stomach and puts him in the stomach. Because that gets around the whole thing of, the Titan didn't eat him. So that Titan's not going to inherit the power. And, of course, now Zeke just needs to get to where Eren is so that way they can activate the rumbling. And, Eren's, that's Eren's goal is to get to Zeke. And, of course, the Marleyans show up and they're ready to start fighting and everything. Fight against Eren, and the Jaegerists and the Eldian army, and I know that in the that it results in the second chapter. Well, I guess Annie's father might kind of qualify Ish as a better father than some of the others, because Annie does seem to love her father, which we'll learn more about Annie's father in the in the second season, in the second half of the season. Learn a little bit about him, and I think we see him in this season, but not too much. But we learned a bit more about Zeke's backstory. We see that Aaron's going down this very, very dark path, and I'm pretty sure there would have been much better ways of doing this that involve less people dying and less lying, Aaron. Less civilians dying, in all honesty. It's one thing to have soldiers die in war. It's another thing for civilians to die. You'd think that Aaron would have been sick of that, but it was also in his mind, it was, well, you're the ones, you're the country that sent a bunch of Titans our way and, use that to kill hundreds and thousands of our people. So fair play. I wouldn't necessarily put that as fair play. But that's kind of the point. And so there's that whole fun sequence that goes on there, and when the next season is finished, I might, because that'll be a while. But I've got like some Attack on Titan type, I guess, my own types of theories, or I kind of like what if scenarios that might be like, how could something have happened that would have resulted in not as many people dying, or what would have been a better situation here, or like my thought on that, the first king's curse type of a thing. And I'll see what happens when I when I get to that. When the next season comes out, I might do a couple of videos throughout the second half of the final season. As like it hits different points in the season, I might talk about it, and of course one at the end. We'll see, but that's what I got here. The video is a little bit longer than I had originally anticipated, but a lot happened in the first part of the season. In the first half of this, so I could have done 2 videos, but I just it's all is one video. We got the Chewie as the Beast Titan in the background over here. I do actually have a Scouts Survey Corps shirt coming. So in one of my next videos when I do this, or at the very least when I do for the end, for the last video when I talk about like the end of the season, end of the series for the anime, I may at least wear it then, but I'll probably wear it before then in some other Attack on Titan video. Well, that's what I got here. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video about me rambling about putting things in a weird order for like this happened and then that happened, but this happened first, but then this happened, but then that happened, and then this happened. And yeah, Attack on Titan is not, I don't have the brain for Attack on Titan, but it's not as ingrained in my brain as like, Digimon or Sailor Moon or even Pokemon to a degree. But, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. And be careful with what you do with grudges, because grudges can grow into horrible, ugly things that are much harder to kill when they've had time to fester. I guess if there's anything that we learn from, Mr. Browse, it's that. So, bye. We've got to let the children out of this forest, at the very least. Else the same thing's just gonna happen again and again. As adults, it's our responsibility to shoulder the sins and hatred of the past.